They weren't born warriors. Most didn't even choose the arena. And yet, they were thrown into a world where pain was routine, survival was rare, and freedom, if it ever came, could be worse than death. But what if the real battle wasn't fought with weapons, but with everything they had to endure just to stand and fight? That journey didn't start with glory. It started with chains. Forget what you think you know about gladiators choosing their path to glory. Most gladiators didn't wake up one morning and think, hey, fighting to the death sounds fun today. The reality was far uglier. Almost everyone in those blood-soaked arenas got dragged there kicking and screaming. It's like getting volunteered for the world's deadliest job, except your boss is armed and your HR department is a guy with a whip. Let's be clear about the so-called volunteers, too. These weren't brave souls seeking honor. They were desperate people who signed contracts that basically said, I give up all my human rights for a slim chance at glory and maybe not starve to death. Anyone telling you these men chose freely hasn't seen the evidence of what drove them to such desperation. The condemned prisoners had it worse. Zero preparation, no weapons training, just raw terror and whatever survival instincts you could muster. It's basically ancient Rome's version of throwing someone into a shark tank and calling it entertainment. Your identity disappeared the moment you became a gladiator. Families were torn apart permanently. You were property now, bought and sold like livestock. They marked you on your face, legs, or hands to show everyone exactly what you were. A slave, a fighter, a piece of human merchandise. Once the system had you, backing out meant death. The Romans didn't do refunds on gladiators. You signed up to fight until you died or somehow earned your freedom, which was about as likely as a Roman emperor developing a conscience. But the physical transformation was just beginning, and it would make the branding seem like a gentle massage. Let's be clear about gladiator training schools. They weren't schools in any normal sense. Imagine the worst gym you've ever been to, then add chains, whips, and a complete disregard for basic human rights. Your day started before dawn with punishment if you weren't fast enough getting up. The cells were tiny and heavily guarded. Privacy didn't exist. You lived under constant surveillance, always one wrong move away from a beating. They truly believed constant fear made better fighters, which by our standards is utterly barbaric. Training was brutal beyond imagination. They handed you weapons deliberately heavier than anything you'd use in actual combat, because apparently the Romans invented the world's most violent gym membership with a 100% fatality rate. The repetition was mind-numbing. Strike, block, dodge, step, hour after hour under the burning sun. Slowing down earned you a whipping, because nothing motivates like the threat of having your back turned into hamburger meat. Medical care was practically non-existent unless your injury threatened to reduce your value as a fighter. Got a minor cut? Walk it off. Broken finger? Tape it up and get back to work. The food strategy was particularly cruel. They fed you high-calorie meals to build mass, but not real strength. It's like preparing a steak for maximum visual impact rather than taste, except the steak was your body and the visual impact was your blood. You trained alongside men who were dying from previous fights. Nothing says motivational poster like training next to a guy whose arm is hanging by a tendon. Speaking of no way home, that deadly education was all preparation for the main event. Game day in ancient Rome wasn't a sporting event. It was a carefully orchestrated death spectacle, and you were the main course. It's like waiting backstage for a performance where the reviews are literally life or death. Before your turn came, you were forced to watch the warm-up acts. Public executions of criminals, wild animals tearing apart condemned prisoners. The message was crystal clear. This is what happens to people who end up in this arena. Forget what you think you know about fair competition. You had absolutely no control over who you fought. The matchmakers paired gladiators based on what would create the most entertaining spectacle, not what was fair. It's like playing video games where the computer always gets to choose nightmare mode and you don't even get a tutorial. The terrain was deliberately unfamiliar. They'd changed the arena layout to include obstacles you'd never trained with. Just when you thought you knew what to expect, they'd throw in something new to make the fight more unpredictable and dangerous. Your equipment was designed to be spectacular rather than practical. Heavy armor that made you overheat, helmets that restricted your vision and breathing. You were basically wearing a costume designed to make your potential death more entertaining. The crowd wasn't just watching. They could scream for mercy if you fought well or demand your death even if you won. Their opinion carried more weight than your actual performance, which is like having your job review conducted by a mob of strangers who paid to see you fail spectacularly. Some fighters collapsed from heat stroke before the actual fighting even began, which is like failing the test before you even get to the first question. But the real horror wasn't just in the fighting itself, it was in what the weapons were specifically designed to do to human flesh. Roman gladiator equipment wasn't designed for your safety. Every piece of gear was specifically crafted to create maximum blood and visual spectacle. The weapons were built to wound in ways that would be visible to the crowd watching from hundreds of feet away, like ancient Rome's version of special effects except with real blood. The fighting styles were deliberately mismatched to create unbalanced fights. They'd pair a heavily armored fighter against someone with speed and agility, a fighter with a net and trident against someone with a sword and shield. Your shield could weigh more than 22 pounds. The helmets were beautiful works of art that severely limited your breathing and vision. Form over function taken to a deadly extreme, because apparently looking impressive was more important than staying alive. Training never prepares you for real injuries. Broken ribs were common, dislocated joints happened regularly, concussions were just part of the job. Getting hurt was basically your job description, with try not to die being more of a helpful suggestion. The trident and net combination was particularly nasty. The net could tangle your limbs while the trident punched holes through your body. Every weapon had a specific purpose, to create wounds that would bleed dramatically for the crowd's entertainment. Your body had no protection in key areas. Your back was usually exposed. Your thighs were vulnerable targets. This wasn't an oversight. The Romans wanted to see blood. Surrender wasn't really an option. The referee had to grant permission for a fighter to yield, and that rarely happened. You fought until you physically couldn't continue, because customer satisfaction was apparently more important than human survival. Even winning didn't mean the pain stopped. It just meant you'd earned the right to do it all again soon. If you're enjoying these brutal historical truths that Hollywood won't show you, smash that like button and let me know in the comments what other glorious historical periods you want me to uncover. Trust me, most of history is way darker than you think. Moving on, daily life as a gladiator meant waking up in pain and going to sleep in pain. Your bones were broken and re-broken regularly. There was no real recovery time between fights because the games had to go on. It's like having a job where workplace injuries are not just expected, but actively encouraged. The medical situation was primitive at best. Limbs got amputated when they couldn't be saved. Eyes were lost to sword strikes. Internal injuries were left to heal on their own. Roman healthcare for gladiators was basically walk it off, taken to its most extreme conclusion. You weren't given time to properly heal before being thrown back into combat. Fresh injuries layered on top of old ones. Scar tissue built up until your body was more damaged parts than original equipment, like a car held together with duct tape and prayer. The psychological toll was devastating and completely ignored. Nightmares were constant. Sleep was difficult. Anxiety never went away. Roman therapy consisted of stop complaining and get back to work, which is about as effective as treating a broken leg with positive thinking. Watching your friends die became routine. Today, you'd eat with someone. Tomorrow, you'd watch them get torn apart in the arena. You just had to compartmentalize the horror and keep functioning. The death rate among gladiators was higher than Roman soldiers faced in many military campaigns. At least soldiers fought for a cause they understood. Gladiators died alone for someone else's entertainment. The fear never stopped. Every day you might be selected for an execution duty or matched against someone far superior. It's like living in a reality TV show where the producers are actively trying to kill you and the audience votes on how you should die. Physical disabilities accumulated rapidly. Most gladiators were visibly damaged within their first year. But the cruelest part was discovering just how brief these nightmare careers actually were. The average gladiator career lasted only 3 to 5 years. Most never saw their 30th birthday. It's like having a profession where the retirement plan is death and the pension is a grave marker. The lower-ranked fighters had even shorter careers because they were considered more expendable. Retirement, when it happened, was usually a cruel joke. Gladiators who somehow survived were typically broken shells of human beings. Their bodies were destroyed. Their minds were shattered. Roman society treated them as permanently tainted individuals. There were no pensions or land grants unless you caught the attention of a wealthy patron. Most retired gladiators ended up poor and homeless, unable to work normal jobs because of their disabilities and social stigma. Freedom often came with a side order of poverty and social rejection. Marriage and family life were forbidden during your fighting career. By the time you might earn freedom, your prime years were gone and your body was too damaged to support a family. It's like being told you can have a normal life right after we finish destroying your ability to have one. Roman society never fully accepted former gladiators as equals. They were seen as dishonorable, tainted by their association with death and violence. You could be the most famous person in Rome and still be banned from polite dinner parties. The grave markers tell the real story. Those that survived to have markers made usually showed records of dozens of fights. Most gladiators were buried anonymously in mass graves like discarded props after the show ended. The few gladiators who made it out with wealth and status were extraordinary exceptions. Success in the gladiator business was like winning multiple lotteries while dodging lightning strikes for years. Frankly, even for an unvarnished historian like myself, it's astonishing how thoroughly the Romans managed to turn human suffering into profitable entertainment. The gladiator system was ultimately about turning human beings into disposable entertainment products. If you think modern entertainment is brutal, at least reality TV contestants get to go home after filming. Gladiators went home in pieces, if they went home at all. So here's what I want to know. If you were a desperate Roman citizen facing starvation, would you have signed that gladiator contract knowing what you know now? Drop your answer in the comments and hit that subscribe button for more brutal historical reality.